and suppress the Ukrainian people.
See the headlines as they happen with breaking news alerts in the BBC app. And stay up to date with live updates on bbc.com/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.
Hello, live from London, this is BBC News. Kamala Harris has given her first major TV interview alongside her running mate Tim Walz since being nominated for the Democrats. UN agencies will start a mass polio vaccination programme in Gaza this weekend after Israel and Hamas agreed to a 3-day pause in fighting. A murder investigation has been launched after a 13-year-old boy was stabbed to death at a house in the West Midlands. Hello, I'm Geeta Gurumuthy. Welcome to BBC News Now. We start in the United States, where Kamala Harris has given her first major TV interview since replacing Joe Biden as the Democratic presidential nominee. Well, the US Vice President has promised to turn a page and offer a new way forward. Speaking to the American network CNN, the Democratic candidate defended her shift in position on key political issues. She insisted her values had not changed. She appeared alongside her running mate Tim Walz in the battleground state of Georgia. She was pushed on immigration and climate change, and in particular why some of her positions appear to have altered since her failed attempt to run for the White House back in 2019. Here's how she responded.
Generally speaking, how should voters look at some of the changes that you've made, that you've explained some of here in your policy? Is it because you have more experience now and you've learned more about the information? Is it because you were running for president in a Democratic primary? And should they feel comfortable and confident that what you're saying now is going to be your policy moving forward?
Dana, I think the most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed. You mentioned the Green New Deal. I have always believed, and I have worked on it, that the climate crisis is real, that it is an urgent matter to which we should apply metrics that include holding ourselves to deadlines around time. We did that with the Inflation Reduction Act. We have set goals for the United States of America and by extension the globe around when we should meet certain standards for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions.
Well, the Republican candidate Donald Trump was also watching, sharing his thoughts on social media. In one word comment, he said boring. He also had this to say about his rival during his own campaign event.
She was sitting behind that desk, this massive desk, and she didn't look like a leader to me, I'll be honest. I don't see her negotiating with President Xi of China. I don't see her with Kim Jong-un like we did with Kim Jong-un.
Well, let's look at some of the key moments from the Kamala Harris interview. She said that the first thing she would do on day one in the White House would be to take measures to support and strengthen the middle class. Asked about the economy, Ms. Harris said that the economic slump was because of mismanagement by Donald Trump during the COVID pandemic. And on immigration, the Vice President again blamed the former president for calling on Republicans to block a bipartisan border bill, adding that she will make sure that it comes to my desk and I would sign it. On the war in Gaza, Kamala Harris reiterated her support for a two-state solution, adding she would focus on a ceasefire, saying we have to get a deal done. And Ms. Harris brushed off Donald Trump's comments on her racial identity, saying it was the same old tired playbook. Next question. Joining me now is Rena Shah, political strategist and Republican National Convention delegate in 2016, and Hillary Rosen, Democratic political strategist and analyst. Thanks very much indeed, both of you, for joining us today. Let me just start with you, Hillary Rosen, for the Democrats. What did you make of it? Because the key question, I guess, in a simple word is, does Kamala Harris look like a potential president?
Well, the goal of Kamala Harris last night was to make sure that first she did no harm. She's leading in many polls and wants to keep that lead, wants to grow that lead as she introduces herself in some battleground states. And she did no harm. She actually answered questions with policy, with thoughtfulness in a way that Donald Trump hasn't. And I think that people saw someone who was going to take their concerns seriously. She focused on the middle class. She focused on climate change. She focused on immigration and foreign policy. I think she did pretty well.
Rina Shah, for the Republicans, what's your overall take? Do you think she did look presidential?
Well, in the words of Donald Trump, boring, boring, boring is a good thing this time. And I would say for anybody who doesn't like Vice President Harris, last night's interview couldn't have changed their minds because it wasn't intended to do that. There weren't any viral moments. And I think she went in knowing she had one job to do, which was to keep it steady. And I think as a political strategist, that's a dream. When you see a candidate stay on script, stay on message, and conduct an interview in a manner that Donald Trump never has and never can, then that is a win on many parts. So I think Republicans who are watching last night to hear something new, they perhaps didn't get much in that way, but what they got was reassurances that she is not going to be the chaos candidate in any way, shape, or form, nor will she be so far off the reservation, so to speak, that they would be uncomfortable taking another look at her.
And Hillary, in terms of the identity question, she brushed that off, didn't she, Hillary Rosen? She really looked as though she did not want to get into the personal attacks, and yet we've seen Donald Trump again on social media still very much going down that path.
It's an important point you're making, and it's obviously something that in the UK has not really been an issue. But in the US, this sort of attempt to divide people on the basis of race, on the basis of gender, and to kind of scare people. Donald Trump put out an ad the other day on Twitter that essentially had one photo of a mass of black people showing chaos and a clean neighborhood full of white people, and said, one is an administration with Donald Trump and one is the administration with Kamala Harris. He's trying to scare people on the basis of race, and she didn't take the bait. And I think that's important to people, that she's not making this a central tenet of her campaign.
Rina Shah, what's your take on that? And are Republicans, even those who don't directly totally support Trump, but are they worried about Republicans losing some of their supporters given the Trump campaign strategy?
Well, the Republicans are certainly nervous about Harris because when you get nervous, what do? You tend to grab at anything. And that's what we have seen VP pick J.D. Vance do on behalf of Trump over this past few weeks since he's been named as the running mate. He doesn't seem to have one particular thing he goes for to be his ace card. And I say that because you've got to lock in the Republicans who've been independently minded, those who crossed over to vote for Biden in 2020, and particularly those who are on the fence about Harris now, who feel that she's been in the White House for 4 years. So why should they give her a second chance? What she tried to do last night was to reframe the campaign in some ways and to reintroduce herself, albeit cautiously. And that is something I think was a brilliant move in many ways. You know, when we talk about athletes showing up on the basketball court, we talk about them making three-pointers. Well, last night, Harris didn't make any three-pointers, but I say that's a good thing for her. She made every shot that she came to make, and that's a good thing. When you're trying to establish yourself as a moderate candidate, as a centrist person who can appeal to independently minded voters, you've got to take that kind of stream of talk, and that's what last night was for me. By not going deep into the racial and identity politics bit, she still leaves that door very much open to courting Republicans. And one particular thing I loved is, and this was historic, she said she would be open to naming a Republican to her cabinet should she be elected. And I say to that, VP Harris, I'm here ready and waiting if you need me.
I was going to ask you, because you're sounding even more positive about Kamala Harris almost than our other Democratic guest, Hillary Rosen. I mean, Rina Shah, I know you're not a Trump supporter. No. Who are you going to vote for this time?
Yeah, I would say for me, I have looked at Harris and have decided that she is the candidate that defeats Donald Trump. And for me, that's everything. I have worked for 8 years to try to remove Trumpism from my party, and this is the best shot we have. So I'm not in lockstep with Vice President Harris as a candidate on policies. Do I love everything about her? Absolutely not. I mean, nobody requires that in politics these days. But what I do think is that she does become the best option for Republicans that want to defeat Trumpism, that want to have a shot at having a normal candidate back in the White House. So like I say to Republicans, come on in. The water's just fine. We don't have to love this candidate. We don't have to be in lockstep in policy with her, but you can support her as a way to oppose Trump and get rid of him once and for all.
Well, other women, of course, are apparently moving more towards the Kamala Harris team, and that is something that the Donald Trump campaign might be worried about. Yesterday, whilst Kamala Harris's interview was being broadcast, it was pre-recorded, of course, Donald Trump did address a major policy issue of his own at a rally at a key battleground state in Michigan. And if you both don't mind just staying with us, I just want to play this for our audience, because Trump claimed that his administration will force insurance companies or the federal government to cover the costs of in vitro fertilization for all Americans. Just have a quick listen to this.
I'm announcing today in a major statement that under the Trump administration, your government will pay for, or your insurance company will be mandated to pay for, all costs associated with IVF treatment, fertilization for women, IVF treatment. Because we want more babies, to put it very nicely.
So Hillary Rosen, obviously Trump addressing that area which Kamala Harris has apparently, resonated with a lot of women in particular across the US. We will see, of course, what happens when the votes are cast. Do you think this is an area that Republicans should be worried about? And what would you say quickly about a Republican being appointed should Kamala Harris win?
Well, first, I don't think that women are going to trust Donald Trump on anything when it comes to their reproductive health. He brags constantly that he is the one who appointed the Supreme Court, who took away women's rights to an abortion, and that is not going to change. He can't run away from that. Secondly, I think he has the chance to get a Republican Congress to support IVF now, and the Republicans refuse to do that. So he has no credibility here. On the other hand, there are some independent-minded Republicans who will be Harris supporters, who I think Harris will want to serve with, will want to reach out across the aisle with. And the fact that she wants to take one into her cabinet is a good thing. That's something that Barack Obama did, and it was quite popular. And I think we will see that in a Harris administration. Less partisanship, more practicality, finding a way to move into the future without Donald Trump.
Rina Shah, very briefly, if I can. One criticism that has been made is that, was this interview, precise enough? Were her answers a little bit vague, a bit rambling at times? If she's doing more interviews, she needs to get better to win over more Republicans like yourself.
Well, she's just going to have to do more interviews in order to appeal to independents and Republicans that are moderate, because this is the shortest time that any modern presidential candidate has had to campaign in. So I don't think we can hold her to some untenable standard here. But she does speak to her pool reporters quite often. She's just going to have to sit down in more settings like this. I think her answers were nice and tight for last night. I think the only part that Republicans can really criticize is that it was very scripted and it was with a very friendly outlet. But I don't think how could she have done any better than that last night. I think the one most brilliant point she made was holding Donald Trump responsible for killing the border bill that would have been bipartisan coming out of Congress. She did a good job illustrating that. I would encourage her to do that kind of illustrative talk on other such issues that are very important and that Republicans will try to get her on.
Rina Shah and Hillary Rosen, great to talk to you. We will speak again soon, I'm sure. Thank you both very much indeed.
Take care.
Thank you.
OK, let us turn to another key area globally, which of course was referred to in that interview, and that is what's going on in the Middle East. UN agencies are preparing to start a mass polio vaccination programme in Gaza this weekend after Israel and Hamas agreed to a series of three-day localised pauses in fighting. The World Health Organization officials have said that 1.2 million polio vaccine doses have already been delivered to Gaza ahead of this rollout due on the 1st of September. Well, the goal is to vaccinate more than 600,000 children after the first case of polio in 25 years was discovered in Gaza. At least 90% of children under the age of 10 need to be reached. Lucy Williamson reports.
Born a month before the Gaza war began, Abdulrahman has played a role in pausing it, something world leaders have struggled to do. Earlier this month, Abdulrahman was diagnosed with polio, the first case in Gaza for 25 years. The family, 9 children in all, live in a camp in central Gaza, displaced multiple times from their home in the north. The constant moving disrupted his vaccinations. His mother says others in the camp are afraid and stop their children playing with him.
The virus stopped his progress. He stopped sitting, stopped walking, stopped crawling, and stopped moving. I want him to be treated. He wants to live and walk like other children.
Abdurrahman's diagnosis has raised fresh alarm over conditions in Gaza's camps. The phased pause in fighting will allow medics to vaccinate more than 500,000 children in stages across the territory. But the conditions that caused this crisis are worsening, say aid organisations, and their solutions are not straightforward.
Due to the insecurity, the damage, the road infrastructure and population displacement, but also based on our experience with this kind of campaigns globally and worldwide, the 3 days might not be enough to achieve adequate vaccination.
Israel's Prime Minister was clear that this was not a ceasefire. The war has so far been resistant to both diplomacy and disease. But preventing another layer of tragedy is seen as one small victory. What the EU's foreign policy chief called a drop of hope in a sea of despair. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Jenin.
Let's get more on the implementation of this vaccination programme. I'm joined by Sam Rose, Director of Planning at UNRWA. Thank you for joining us. Sam, can you just tell us, first of all, how polio is spread and how concerned are you about the levels that it could be at?
Absolutely. Thank you. I mean, we're deeply concerned about the levels at which it may be at. There's one confirmed case that your reporter referred to. There may be many more because the health system here has been decimated largely over the past 10 months. The bombardments, the destruction of clinics, the collapse of water and sewage, solid waste management infrastructure, the malnutrition. These are precisely the conditions in which a vaccine like this reemerges, a vaccine which had been eradicated for more than 25 years inside the Gaza Strip has reemerged. So we're deeply concerned, and at the same time we welcome so much, as everyone here does, the respite for just a small amount of time from the bombings, from the evacuation orders, that we hope will allow us to administer a successful campaign, working closely with the World Health Organization, UNICEF, the Ministry of Health and other partners. But as you said, this is a massive effort. We just really hope that it will be successful for the children we're vaccinating.
The disease re-emerging, of course, rather than the vaccine re-emerging. But just explain for us how you actually get to all the children and how can you be sure that all the children there will be reached? Is 3 days enough?
3 days perhaps isn't enough, as your previous interviewee said. And this will be 3 days across 3 different areas of the Gaza Strip: the southern governorates, the middle governorates, and the northern governorates. The vaccines, most of them have now arrived in Gaza. The personnel who will administer those vaccines, who will register the children, who are raising awareness amongst the community, have been hired, have been trained, are out there. But doing anything in Gaza right now is incredibly difficult. Surviving the night is very difficult. So we face a number of challenges. The fact that there will be pauses, humanitarian pauses, the fact that there will be no evacuation orders make our lives more easy. It means that we can distribute the vaccines, the fuel, the staff to the areas in which they need to go. And UNRWA, my organization, will be vaccinating up to half of these children. We've taken on about 1,100 of our personnel will be involved, and we'll be vaccinating at our primary health clinics that we have, at health points that we've set up in areas that people have been vaccinated too. We have mobile teams who work in the dozens and dozens of schools where hundreds of thousands of people are sheltering. And we will do what would previously have been house to house, but now is tent to tent, largely given the realities of the situation in which people live. But reaching that more or less magic number of 90% of children will be very difficult because we don't quite know how many children there are. We don't know how many are still alive. We certainly don't know precisely anyway.
Sam Rose, I'm so sorry to have to cut in. We're out of time on this, but we do really appreciate you giving us that explanation. Director of Planning at UNRWA, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. A 13-year-old boy has been stabbed to death at a house in the West Midlands. A murder investigation has been launched after police were called to Lovett Avenue, Oldbury on Thursday. The child, who is being treated by paramedics, died. BBC reporter Kevin Reid is at the scene and sent this update.
You can see behind me the property where what the police are describing as a tragic incident happened. Yesterday afternoon at about 4 o'clock, paramedics were called to the property where they found a young 13-year-old boy who'd suffered stab wounds, and in spite of their efforts they were unable to save him. Now today there's been lots of police activity here, particularly at the rear of the property. We've seen several or many forensic officers coming and going as the police carry about their investigations to establish exactly what has happened. We've also seen groups of people laying flowers. There was a group of 4 or 5 people turned up about an hour ago. They appeared to be either close friends or family members. They went up to the property and laid flowers on the doorstep. Now the police are describing this, as I say, as a tragic incident. Detective Superintendent Sean Edwards said it's absolutely tragic. A young life has been lost. We have specialist officers who will be supporting the family of the boy, and they have detectives working flat out to find out whoever is responsible and bring them into custody as soon as possible. And that's what the police have said so far today, and we're expecting to find out more later on.
Kevin Reid there. The German government has announced a package of tougher security and asylum measures after 3 people were fatally stabbed at a street festival last week. The killings sparked an intense debate over asylum laws when it emerged that the main suspect was a young Syrian man facing deportation. The announcement comes ahead of elections on Sunday in 2 eastern German states, Saxony and Thuringia, where the far-right Alternative for Germany is riding high in the polls. Let's get more on this. I'm joined by Michaela Kufner, Chief Political Editor at Deutsche Welle. Thank you so much for your time. Just explain for us the political backdrop to this with these key elections this weekend.
Yes, there are 2 regional elections coming up in 2 eastern states, Saxony and Thuringia. And both of these states are pretty much the exception on the German landscape. They are a stronghold of the far-right anti-migration Alternative for Germany party, which has been campaigning on a threat of stabbings of migrants, killing innocent Germans. And it really is quite a coincidence that last Friday, Germany saw this, what is believed to be a terrorist attack by a rejected asylum seeker from Syria who should no longer have been in the country. He should have been sent back to Bulgaria under Dublin rules, which would have allowed for him to be sent back. German authorities failed to do this. So the government found itself in a spot where it needs to prove it can act fast and swiftly ahead of those polls, which will set the mood for the political landscape for elections coming up in a year's time. But for now, it was surviving this week. That was the key issue for the government. And they announced a set of measures which will tighten asylum laws. But also today, they got a direct flight from Germany to Afghanistan, which is ruled by the Taliban, underway in a demonstration that they are able to send back failed asylum claimants, particularly when they are criminals. But here in Germany, ahead of these key polls, we see a very heated debate where any differentiation between terrorism and migration has been lost for now.
And in terms of these elections that are coming up, what is the outcome that's expected and how will that affect the overall political situation?
Well, when you look at the polls, the far-right AfD party looks pretty set to come on top. It is seeing itself neck and neck with the conservative CDU, Angela Merkel's party, although she no longer is active within her own party, in the state of Saxony, which has a conservative CDU state premier. They are pretty much certain, according to polls, to come first in Thuringia. At the same time, they have no chance of being part of the government, with all other parties having said they will not go into a coalition with them. So these elections are about who will lead a potential very complicated coalition in these two states. But most importantly, they will most likely deliver a victory for the far-right AfD party here in Germany. And that will increase their political clout in shaping political debates in Germany as it enters a new election year next year.
And so this announcement on asylum, obviously, the timing does seem important and interesting. Specifically, do you think it is going to go far enough to reassure the public?
That is an open question, but the real success in this was that a government led by a social democrat whose party doesn't really play much of a role in these upcoming elections demonstrated that it can act. Olaf Scholz is under pressure to demonstrate that his coalition can still deliver amidst all the infighting, with the government itself struggling to even get something basic like a budget together.
Michaela Kufner from Deutsche Welle, thank you very much indeed for being with us here on BBC News. Do stay with us. We are back in a few moments. I'm Geeta Gurumuthy. You're watching BBC News Now.